Let us pray. Eternal God, we come today to say thank you. From the bottom of our hearts to the depths of our souls, we give thanks to you for all that you have done, for all that you are doing, for all that you shall do in the life of our beloved university community. We pause to say thank you. We come today, O God, to thank you for the life and for the legacy of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. We thank you, O God, for his commitment to Fisk University, and we thank you for his unparalleled contribution toward humanity. To be sure, O God, we give thanks for his contribution to our civil and our human rights through the Crisis magazine of the NAACP, and we thank you for his Christian witness as revealed through the book Prayers for Dark People. Today, O God, we pray that you might help us to continue the legacy of this great thinker and activist. We pray that you might provide us with the courage to speak truth to power on behalf of the despised, the dispossessed, the disinherited, and disrespected people throughout this world. Empower us, O God, to bring the light of reason, the logos, to those who are still held captive to the bonds of ignorance and crippling despair. And lastly, O God, we pray that you might show us how to show love toward one another, just as Du Bois did, so that all the people of the world might see your glory. Today, O God, we give thanks for someone who has meant so much to so many, and we thank you for your presence in our lives. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Van Newkirk, 17th President of Fisk University, and I bring you greetings from the Office of the President and from the Fisk University family. I'd like to read a proclamation that we have prepared for this momentous event. And the proclamation goes as Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, 1888. Whereas over 135 years ago, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois enrolled as a student at Fisk University, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois served as an editor of the student literary publication, the Fisk Herald, during his matriculation, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois received a baccalaureate degree from Fisk University in 1888, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois then became the first African American to receive a Ph.D. from Harvard University, established a Department of Sociology at Atlanta University, and co-founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois founded and edited the Crisis, an African American quarterly magazine published by the NAACP for 24 years, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois published numerous scholarly studies on African American history, politics, sociology, race relations, Pan-Africanism, and African American democracy, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois established himself as a leader and legacy in civil and human rights for African Americans, primarily through the discovery and advancement of knowledge, through research, and whereas Dr. W.B. Du Bois received an honorary degree from Fisk University in 1958 as part of the celebration of his 90th birthday, and whereas Fisk University honors Dr. W.B. Du Bois via a residence hall in his name, an honors program in his name, and a statue in his likeness on campus, and whereas Fisk University recognizes February 23rd as his birthday for Dr. W.B. Du Bois, a scholar and social activist with integrity and intellect who made substantial contributions to a global society. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that Fisk University will also recognize Dr. W.B. Du Bois Day annually on February 23rd. Further resolved that the permanent records of Fisk University shall reflect that Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois was a Fisk son, forever on the altar, and further resolved that this proclamation be placed in Fisk University's historical records, and that copies shall be given to the descendants of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois on this February 23rd, 2022, signed by me, Van R. Newkirk, President of Fisk University.
Hello, greetings. My name is Dr. Karita Brown, and I am the director of the John Lewis Center for Social Justice here at Fisk University. I also hold the visiting Diane Nash Descendants of Emancipation Chair. I am so honored to be here to deliver this occasion today in celebration of W.E.B. Du Bois's birthday. On February 23rd, 1868, a North Star was born to us. W.E.B. Du Bois was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, in a small New England town. It was there that he had his racial consciousness awakened at the young age of not more than 4 or 5 years old. He writes in Souls of Black Folk how he, although grew up in a majority white community and had lots of friends, was a great student, he experienced his first tacit racism on the playground when a young girl refused to give him a playing card. And it was there that he understood that there was this barrier called the color line. Du Bois was a prolific student. Some dare say that he was a genius and he knew it as a young man. And he always had his sights on attending college and university. At the age of 17, he tragically lost his mother, who raised him as a single parent in Barrington, Massachusetts. And his church community took it upon themselves to raise money to put together a bursary to send Du Bois to college. Now, in his mind at that point, he thought that he would go straight to Harvard. That was the closest university to him, and one that he had seen himself at since he was a young boy. However, his congressional community had a different idea in mind, and they set up a scholarship for him to attend Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was there that not only was his racial consciousness awakened, his sense of justice and pride was instilled in him in such a new and effervescent way. Of his time at Fisk, he says, it was to me an extraordinary experience. I was thrilled to be, for the first time, among so many people of my own color, rather of such various and such extraordinary colors, which I had only glimpsed before, but who it seemed were bound to me by new and exciting eternal ties. Never before had I seen young men so self-assured, who gave themselves such airs, and colored men at that. And above all, for the first time, I saw those beautiful girls. And that's a quote from Du Bois's 1940s text, Dusk of Dawn, when he was reflecting on his time at Fisk University. It was at Fisk where Du Bois had instilled in him a sense of service leadership. He speaks fondly about his summers where he would go out, just like many of his Fisk collaborators and fellow students, out into the rural areas of Tennessee where he would teach over the summers. And it was there that Du Bois discovered his penchant as an educator. And he taught in a small rural school in Tennessee to a class of students who had never before been exposed to a formal classroom. That experience inspired a chapter in the iconic Souls of Black Folk that really put Du Bois on the international platform as a man of letters in 1903. Also reflecting on his time at Fisk, Du Bois was deeply impacted by the Fisk Jubilee Singers, who brought the Negro spiritual to the world and gave so much back to Fisk. This was a great source of pride for Du Bois that he reflected and wrote about for the rest of his days. Even early on in the Souls of Black Folk, in speaking about the Fisk Jubilee Singers and the grandeur of Jubilee Hall, Du Bois wrote, "Then when I came to Nashville, I saw the great temple built of these songs towering over the pale city. To me, Jubilee Hall seemed ever made of the songs themselves, and its bricks were red with the blood of dust and toil. Out of them rose for me morning, noon, and night, bursts of wonderful melody, full of the voices of my brothers and sisters, full of the voices of the past." What Du Bois is marking on here is the rich history and legacy that he understood that he was tapping into during his time as a Fisk student, and that carried him for the rest of his life. As a writer, as a scholar, organizer, and activist, both here in these United States and globally in his endeavors pushing the Pan-African Congress and extending his work to dismantle the color line globally for all people who live on the other side of the veil. So we honor Du Bois on this very day, celebrating his birthday, a son of Fisk University, who has made us all proud, one of the greatest American intellectuals of the 20th century, and I dare say all human history. So happy birthday, Du Bois. I thank you so much to the planning committee at Fisk University, who has worked so very hard to put together this joyous occasion, this inaugural celebration that will go on for years to come. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Jeffrey Allen Peck. I am Dr. Du Bois's great-grandson.
My name is Arthur Mcfarlane, and I am the great-grandson of Dr. William Edward Burkhart Du Bois.
My relation to Dr. Du Bois is through my mother, who is his granddaughter, and my grandmother, who is his daughter.
He is my mother's grandfather, so he is my great-grandfather on my mother's side of the family. And, he is obviously one of my heroes in my life. In my mind, I always have him there thinking about, well, what would he think about this, or what would he do about this? And so he's been a big impact. He's had a big influence on my life. So our family has really committed itself to maintaining the legacy of my great-grandfather. He was recognized by many people as having a broad reach in terms of his scholarship, in terms of the work that he did in the NAACP and the many books that he'd written, the sociology department that he'd started at Atlanta University, and et cetera. And so there were a lot of pieces to his legacy. And each of us in the family really feel as though that his legacy is an important one to maintain. So we talk to everybody that we can reach out to about his background, his legacy, his history, his life. My brother does talks, I do talks, talking from anywhere from elementary schools to corporations, and just trying to make sure that they understand who he was and that his life lives on through not only us, but through the many scholars who study his work.
The goal of the family is to help preserve and promote Dr. Du Bois's legacy and aid in any way in his vision of world peace, a world without racism, talk about bringing nations together to sit down and discuss differences rather than to resort to war, which he was highly against. Most of all, seeing people of the world see one another as equals. And that was his vision, and that is the vision of the family.
In fact, I have really fond memories of Fisk, even though I've never been there. I've never been to Nashville, never visited the university. However, my fond memories of Fisk come through my father and my mother and my stepmother and my sister's father, all of whom went to Fisk. And I have fond memories of Fisk reading what Grandpa wrote about going there and about all of the work that he was doing and how different it was to be at Fisk as opposed to in his hometown in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So I've never been there, but I have many fond memories of the way Fisk has impacted my family and the connections that my parents all had to the university. I also have connections to Fisk, I think, through the work that I do with many HBCUs. And so I really think that Fisk is one of the premier HBCUs in the country. And because of that, it has a very special place, not just in our history, but in our future. I think as we look at the work that's being done at Fisk and the art and the music and the various different things that Fisk is engaged in, I think it's important for us to continue to look at HBCUs and Fisk in that vanguard as being places where our young people are being trained to make a future that we've only dreamed of, that Du Bois only dreamed of, that Grandpa thought about for his children and his grandchildren, but he knew would have to happen through people like yourself, people who are working in the Fisk arena.
Very, very humbling to know that they think that highly of him. But at the same time, I'm extremely excited to know that many places that he actually traveled to or attended are admiring and giving him recognition at this point in this stage in history.
So Fisk University is holding this inaugural honoring of my great-grandfather, and they intend to do that on an annual basis, which I think is fascinating and fantastic. It really is a connection that Grandpa had that really changed his life. He went from living in a very small town, predominantly white, in the southwestern corner of Massachusetts. He was born in Great Barrington. And he really had that sort of insular upbringing that goes along with being raised in a small town and being raised in a rural community. And going to Fisk, he had the opportunity to then see what Black people were really like. He describes it in a couple of his autobiographies about the many hues and colors of his people. And that really changed the way he saw the world. It changed his life in many, many ways. And so I think the fact that Fisk is honoring him on an annual basis really would be something that he would be proud of, something that he would feel is really an honor for him, because it was such an honor for him to be there and to look at things from that different perspective and with those different eyes. When I first heard that Fisk was planning to do this annual celebration and planning to honor my great-grandfather through this proclamation and through the work that is being done, it's really exciting that Fisk is doing this on a virtual basis and is doing it in a way that a lot of people like my stepmom can get on her computer and watch and listen to and really be a part of. So I'm excited, and I was excited when I heard about it, and I immediately sent her an email and said, "You're not going to believe this." And so really pretty cool, really great stuff.
Just, just kind of a moment of just a wow, a pinch yourself moment. Like, I think it's an extreme honor. And I'm excited that he's being recognized, and I'm very thankful as well. The significance of Dr. Bois's work today, we're still working at a lot of things that they were working at in his time frame. We've advanced, of course, but we're still fighting for equal voting rights. We're still fighting to see people in the Congress. We've actually had a chance to see an African American president. We currently have an African American as a vice president. These are the dreams and the visions that he had, and we're seeing these things happen now, but we feel like there's still a lot to do. And there's people that like to roll back all the advancements of those like Dr. Du Bois and many others, like Dr. King. They want to roll these advancements backwards. And so we're kind of in a struggle, not only to keep what traction that we've made, but to continue to advance.
So my great-grandfather's legacy as it relates to his activism and the work that he did around the Black movement, starting very early on in his life, he really tried in many ways, both through the writings and the teachings that he had, as well as through many of the other different forms of reaching out to people to change people's perspective about what Black people were about. And Black people are very diverse. They were diverse then in ways that we really did not get clear to us in what was taught to us in school. And Grandpa knew that. He knew that Black people had sort of been written out of history, that their history had been marginalized and erased in many ways. And so he struggled for all of his life to get that history out in front of people, not just so that white people would understand what Black people were about, but so that Black people would understand what they were about themselves. And it was really fascinating. In 1900, when he went to the Paris Exposition, he took materials from many of the HBCUs, including materials from Booker T. Washington and folks down at Tuskegee Institute, to the Paris Exposition in 1900, and won a gold medal, a blue ribbon for the work that he was bringing. But the reason that he took that work there was because he had spent 2 years at the University of Berlin in the process of getting his PhD from Harvard. And he knew that people in Europe had a perspective of Black people that wasn't reality. He knew that white people here in this country had a perspective of Black people that wasn't a reality. And he knew that Black people themselves, because there was no internet, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, we couldn't communicate with one another the way we can now. And he knew that Black people didn't have a sense of themselves from the reality that he could see. And so his vantage point as a scholar and as someone who was connected to many other Black people around the country and around the world really made it such that he felt obligated to bring that information, bring that story, bring that picture to the rest of the world. And in doing so, I think he transformed both how we see ourselves as Black people, as well as how we see our future.
Future generations should view him, in my opinion, as a giant in civil rights. He is considered by many the first to fight for civil rights for African Americans. And as far as them furthering it, continue to strive to be everything that he told us we could be. He said we could be intellectuals, we could be presidents, we could be vice presidents, we could be on the Congress, we could be doctors, lawyers, we could be anything that we put our minds to. And I think that my great-grandfather instilled the fact that all the lies that were told about what we weren't able to achieve, he proved that we could. He gave us hope. And hope is what our future generations should continue to have and display.
So as we look forward and we look backward at the same time, Dr. Du Bois's work is, I think, some of the most important work that people today need to look at, both Black people and white people. I think his work brings forward many of the answers as well as clarifies many of the questions that we have about this issue that we call race relations, whether we want to call it diversity or inclusion or equity or whatever we want to, whatever language we want to wrap around it. Intersectionality is some language that we're starting to use more in this work as well. Whatever language you want to wrap around it, Grandpa was talking about that in some way, shape, or form 100 years ago. And so as we look back at his work and we look to carry that work forward, I hope that we can stand on that foundation and really utilize the things that he did and the things that he said and the things that he created as evidence that, number one, this is not something new. What's going on for Black people today is not new. We were being enslaved and killed hundreds of years ago. And even after the Emancipation Proclamation, it didn't really change that much. And things haven't changed in some ways since then. And so there is a lot to work on. And I think people need to look back at that history and see how and why we got to where we are.
To me, Dr. Du Bois was a humanitarian, an intellectual, and an educator.
So I think that it's impossible for me to encapsulate who Grandpa was to me in 3 words. 3 words is too short a set of places to examine the 95 years that he had and to talk about how those 95 years impacted me. So I think if I were to try to come up with 3 words that encapsulate who he is to me, I would say courageous, would be one of those words. Intelligent would be one of those words, and grandpa would be the 3rd word for me. Regardless as to what he may be to other folks, he's really just my grandfather.
I am Daykiera Sweat, a junior honors student here at Fisk University, psychology major, African American Studies minor from Lexington, Kentucky. I'm super excited to tell you all a little bit about my perspective and my experience being in the W.E.B. Du Bois honors program. It means a lot. W.E.B. Du Bois, he was a legend who left a legacy. We talk about legacy all day long, but I am a speaking, walking testimonial of what Du Bois has done for us. He's paved the way for scholars and leaders like myself, like you and I. Being in the honors program means a lot. It's given me resources and opportunities that I don't think I would have anywhere else. I've been able to get into GRE programs and just prepare for life after Fisk. I've had the opportunity of being on calls to discuss fellowship opportunities and also gaining resources to better enhance my knowledge on African American history.
My name is Zarya Reed. I am a senior psychology major here at Fisk University, hailing all the way from Cleveland, Ohio. I was inducted into the W.E.B. Du Bois Honor Society last spring, and I was so excited to become a part of this program. Just hearing about the contributions of Dr. Du Bois throughout my matriculation since I stepped foot on campus has been monumental and so inspirational to me. I try and model myself each and every day after him. Just having the courage to break barriers in the educational field has definitely been very inspirational, and I hope to be just like him.
I'm Nate Jossell. I'm a senior business and data science double major. Du Bois is an inspiration to me, or a motivation, if you will, just because he was declined from certain opportunities before he came here, and really Fisk helped him excel into the man that he wanted to be. And I see myself in that same light, to where Fisk can give me that same jump start, and being in his program is just more the reason that it's bigger than myself and just gives me that extra motivation to push.
My name is Rihanna Thomas, and I am a freshman this year at Fisk University. I am a political science major, and I do plan on venturing off and expanding into the sociologist track. And W.E.B. Du Bois really sets a tone for a sociologist paradigm for me, as I see a lot of myself in him. And through reading his book, The Souls of Black Folk, he really dissects the Black experience post-enslavement and I'm just very, very honored to be walking the same grounds as him years later.
Hi, my name is Precious Osegali. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm a junior majoring in computer science, and I'm a member of the W.E.B. Du Bois Honors Program. So I know he is the first Black person to go to Harvard, and I intend to go to Harvard after Fisk to get my PhD. And what the honors program means to me is I get to be a part of what Du Bois stood for, what he's worked for, and that's an honor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And now I would like to introduce today's keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is one of the nation's most renowned professors, gifted writers, aspiring preachers, knowledgeable lecturers, and reviving media personalities. As a professor who earned a PhD in religion from Princeton University, Dyson has taught at some of the nation's most distinguished universities, including Brown, UNC Chapel Hill, Columbia, DePaul, the University of Pennsylvania, and Georgetown University. He is currently the Distinguished University Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies, College of Arts and Sciences, and Centennial Professor at Vanderbilt University. As a writer of more than 20 books, New York Times bestseller, The Black Presidency, Barack Obama and the Politics of Race in America, and Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America that was called by the New York Times one of the most frank and searing discussions on race, a deep, serious, urgent book, which should take its place in its tradition of Baldwin's The Fire Next Time and King's Why We Can't Wait. The Fire Next Time and King's Why We Cannot Wait has been super important to today's history. Reckoning with Race in America, published December 2020, was heralded as Amazon's best-selling book for 2020. We at Fisk University, as scholars and leaders, are extremely honored that Dr. Dyson could share a few words with us today. Thank you.
Sweet, oh, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Sweet, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Sweet, oh, sweet chariot, coming for to carry
want to thank Ms. Dekiera Sweat for that gracious and generous introduction, and not only the wonderful introduction of Ms. Sweat and the magnificent opportunity presented by Dr. Rogers, but of course, the president of this great institution, my dear friend, President Van R. Newkirk, who's doing an extraordinary job leading this institution into the 21st century with profound commitment to the noble ideals that W.E.B. Du Bois himself argued for, to Dr. Rogers for this extraordinary opportunity to come to this World Historical University and to be able to talk about the greatest scholar, intellectual, and public thinker that Black America has ever produced, Dr. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. What an honor it is in his name to talk a bit about his evolution, his legacy, his impact, and what it means to be an engaged Black intellectual in the 21st century. C. Van Woodward, the great Southern historian, said that a title is a contract between an author, or in this case, a thinker, a speaker, and his or her audience. And so if I were to give title to this talk today, I would name it W.E.B. Du Bois for the 21st century. Dr. Du Bois famously declared in an essay that was printed in 1903 in his book Souls of Black Folk, gathering together essays that had been strewn across the literary horizon over the years in Atlantic Magazine and other places, said in that famous 1903 powerful essay that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. A great line, perhaps the most famous, from that already extraordinary book. He spoke, and I paraphrase, of two warring ideals, two unreconciled strivings, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Okay, that wasn't a paraphrase, that was an exact quote. But the point is, Dr. Du Bois is speaking about what we have now come to call double consciousness. The war in Black bodies, in Black brains, in Black brightness, in Black culture, between a recognition of our essential Black identity and our essential American identity, the struggles between our color and culture and our country, the constant struggle between these ideals of identity, who we are as human beings. And Du Bois says in that book that we neither seek to bleach ourselves in an ocean of whiteness, paraphrasing it, or to force America to become subservient to our conceptions as Black people of what this nation is, but a rather rambunctious, ramshackle, evolving, electrifying interaction between ideals and thoughts and ideas and reflections in the breast of Black people, a sort of seventh son, Du Bois spoke of us as, and the broader white American, Euro-American culture that was the context for the struggles around Black identity and the quest for emancipation and freedom in this nation. So if the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, we would like to believe that the problem of the 21st century is not the same, that we have made extraordinary progress, that we have come a long way, and we have, that America no longer bows down at the shrine of color consciousness, that America no longer genuflects before the altar of pure identities rooted in whiteness. And yet the truth is that we continue to struggle with these ideas. We continue to struggle with race in America. We continue to struggle with color in America. We continue to struggle with white supremacy in America. We continue to struggle with the ways in which the unconscious biases proliferate at an astonishing rate, shaping the collective unconscious of a nation that is often indebted to ideas that it refuses to make transparent. It is not simply an intellectual failure to come to grips with the genealogy and the source of ideas that informs the construction of America. It is also the moral failure of nerve, the ethical refusal to acknowledge that America's difficulty in expressing a level of transparency about race is that it continues to contend with, to counteract, and to fight off a recognition that race is deeply and profoundly stitched into the fabric of American society, deeply entrenched into our culture. Why is it then that here we are in our particular age, when we think about Du Bois for the 21st century, the color line is persistent, and we see it in the struggles over the alphabets, the acronyms that have proliferated in our culture. BLM, MLK, CRT, BHM. So whether we're speaking about Black Lives Matter, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, critical race theory, or Black History Month, these acronyms evoke passionate resistance and the collective enterprise of American whiteness and the historical legacy of white supremacy, and evokes a great deal of terror and fear in the hearts of white brothers and sisters and their acolytes and their allies who refuse to grapple with the historical trajectory of the racial impetus that has motivated America from the get-go. This is why there's controversy around issues that many white brothers and sisters don't understand. Do they know the difference between CRT and OPP? Do they really understand? If we're going to throw in a 90s hip-hop reference, you're down with OPP? Yeah, you know, y'all know what that is, right? In this case, other people's projects, other people's performances, other people's politics. Do we really know that critical race theory was created in law schools? Derek Bell as an inspiration, Kimberly Crenshaw as one of the crafters, Marie Matsuda, Charles Lawrence, Gary Peller, and on and on. A theory devoted to the recognition that it's not, that is, racial intolerance, racial bigotry, racial bias, and systemic racism is not about individuals but institutions, not about sentiments but structures. And so all critical race theory was trying to say is that you can't even go to the courts, which are ostensibly neutral and dedicated to the proposition that they can adjudicate, that is, make decisions between competing claims about what is true and what is just. But the very arbitration of those ideals, the very negotiation of them is not arbitrary, it is not fixed, it is rather informed by and infused with a biased perception that shapes the very awareness of racial identity in this country and of American identity. We can't distinguish the two. So this double consciousness that Du Bois spoke about is not only operating within the black brain and the black body and the black breast, but it operates in American society. America is at war with itself. And so now critical race theory becomes a bête noire. Critical race theory becomes the boogeyman. Critical race theory becomes the lightning rod of controversy for white brothers and sisters who are seeking a way to fight back against this uncomfortable feeling of not being in control of the narrative anymore. Because who controls the narrative controls the perception, and who controls the narrative and the perception controls the construction of stories, mythologies, policies and politics that accrete around those mythologies and stories and narratives, the power that is imbued when you control the narrative. You began to shape the courts of American society, including the Supreme Court. You began to shape the educational institutions of American society. You began to spook young white people and older white people. Oh my God, critical race theory is going to make your kids hate you. We don't want your kids hating you. Plus your name is David Duke, and we don't even want them to hate you then. We want to hate what you do. If you are a white supremacist, we want them to hate that. And yet this boogeyman, this lightning rod of controversy has been generated out of deep and profound ignorance, a persistent and lethal indifference, and outright hostility to a progressive and complicated and nuanced conception of blackness, the kind that Du Bois put forward in so many books, not only in The Souls of Black Folk, 1935, Black Reconstruction, where Professor Du Bois spoke about the psychological wages of whiteness. And that's what we're confronting even in this day. The payoff of even poor white people, of the manipulation by the overlords, the captains of industry, and those who prevail over them, who are white as well. The same ones who prevail over us in a collective American society prevail over them as well. But the payoff is, the trade is, yeah, but at least you ain't a Negro. The psychological wages of whiteness. I might be poor, I don't have a bunch of resources or education, but I ain't a Negro. And you know the word that is used. Martin Luther King Jr. in jail in Birmingham, Alabama. And his jailers come to him saying, you know, segregation is right and integration is wrong, and they argue. And then Dr. King finally asked them, how much money do you make? And when they told him, he said, you need to be out here marching with us. This double consciousness, this two warring ideals, two unreconciled strivings, not only in the black brain and the black body and the black breast, but in the collective white unconscious and unconsciousness. People not even aware of the motivating factors, the inspiring ideals to which they are subject, in whose thrall they continually happen to be. And when we think about that, America on the one hand claims to be for justice, liberty, and truth, and emancipation, freedom for all, wanting everybody to vote, to register their viewpoint about what American society is, and yet we have constantly the attempt to undermine voting rights for so many folk in this country, especially black people and older people and Jewish brothers and sisters in, say, Florida. Robocalls telling them dates have been moved, denying the legitimacy of student IDs or IDs for those on SNAP, but accepting the IDs of those who are gun owners to be able to register to vote. The courts are continually hearing cases of drawing districts that favor majority white districts, shooting down those who fight back and say we must redraw them with the consciousness that historically black people have been underrepresented, and other minorities and BIPOC and global majorities or people of a global majority, whitewashed, exploited, marginalized. And so the truth is we are continually fighting. Du Bois for the 21st century is not only about the color line, but about the war in the soul of America. The warring ideals that we see manifest. And the irony is that black people have often been the very avatar, the very symbols and the very representatives of the noble ideals to which the nation aspires, that the republic holds dear, but we are seen as disloyal citizens Du Bois argued in World War I that black people ought to take up arms and defend the nation, even though he was a radical progressive in his own day and became much more so the older he got before he quit America, relocated in the motherland in Ghana. And so Du Bois was not anti-American. He was anti-racist. He was against the viciousness of the persistence of ideals that fetishized epidermis and skin, that fetishized a particular white way of willing the world into being. And so the Du Bois for the 21st century is an aid to us to challenge the war in the American soul, this double consciousness in the souls of white folk, in the minds of the majority. And on the one hand, they claim to love all that good stuff and read all those good books, whether they're reading the Federalist Papers, whether they're reading the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the American Magna Carta, reading the Bill of Rights, and trying to stay true to that, they claim, some of them, and yet on January 6th of last year of 2021, storming the Capitol in the name of being incensed over the limits imposed upon them to do what? To do what they wanted to do, willy-nilly, arbitrarily, to command the power of the state to reinforce their bigoted beliefs about what should occur, undermining an election that was fairly and justly held. And yet all of that commitment to Blue Lives Matter went out the door. They mad at critical race theory. They mad at Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter is trying to challenge the dominant paradigm of the distribution of resources, especially around police in this country. They're trying to shift the resource base so that people who are responding to calls that are involving mental health won't be answered by police people who have little expertise in that, or these no-knock warrants that, again, Brother Locke gets killed by in his own room, in his own apartment, laying on his own couch asleep, legally possessing a gun. And why wouldn't he reach for it when you're knocking down his door and announcing as you go in? What else was he to do but to reach for his weapon, thinking he may be in peril, that his life is in danger, and then the justification is that he pulled a gun and therefore he had to be killed. And yet you are unrighteously and unjustly putting pressure on him, seeking out an apparent offender of the law at the expense of an innocent man's life. And too often that innocent person happens to be black. Brother Locke on the one hand, Sister Breonna Taylor on the other. And so many others that we cannot name. And so Du Bois helps us wrestle with this double consciousness, this war within the American soul about its ostensible commitment to noble ideals, and yet the undercutting commitment to its own narrow, bigoted beliefs. Because we saw on January 6th, all of this discourse about we can't stand defund the police, we are for Blue Lives Matter, except when Blue Lives Matter contradicts the chaotic, cataclysmic involvement in a protest? In political discourse? Ham-handed, vicious, rebuttal, insurrection, resistance, and the attempt to undermine the rule of law. justified by those who have been sworn to uphold and protect the United States of America. And so Du Bois helps us understand that critical contradiction, that crucial conflict at the heart of the American soul, because the noble ideas that we claim to nurture in our quiet moments of reflection upon the emancipators and the inspiring instigators of democracy in our culture, when we reflect on them, we realize that on January 6th, what we saw was not a noble operation of political conscience, not a debate, not political discourse, as the outrageous claims of the right have been, and the conservatives in this country, and even the Republican establishment. What we saw was a repudiation of everything that is hallowed and holy to American civic life, civic virtue at risk. And so, once again, black people proved to be the bellwether and the benchmark, to mix metaphors, to be the constant North Star, to throw in another metaphor. The ideals that we nurture, the beliefs that we hold, the values that we inspire, ones that Du Bois spoke about so eloquently and so powerfully in Dusk of Dawn, and spoke about in his prayers, penned to God, spoke about in his eloquent sociological analysis, the Philadelphia Negro, constantly reinforcing the value and the vitality of wrestling from a black perspective with the world in which we exist, and giving that world, imbuing that world with dynamic moral force. And so, my brothers and sisters, what we saw on January 6th is the fact that the real religion in America is whiteness for many white brothers and sisters. The real politics is about a concentrated whiteness. The real fabric that is brought together, knit together in the name of America is truly whiteness. The great philosopher Beyonce Giselle Knowles said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. And so Du Bois for the 21st century helps us understand the lethal persistence of the color line even now, but not just a line, not just a color line, but a colored consciousness, colored by bias, colored by institutional inequity, colored by systemic injustice. Any word ending in system is vulnerable to that. The political system, the criminal justice system, the public education system, the health care system. All of these infected by potentially powerful viruses. And as I end, not only in terms of the color line, not only in terms of the conflict, but also in terms of the tremendous chaos we have seen revealed as a result of the pandemic. And we know that we've seen 900,000 lives in America alone, millions around the globe, sacrificed to this virus that we in America have had a hard time applying our so-called scientific superiority to. We ain't even interested in science no more. We don't even believe in that. Now, think about Du Bois, who in the early part of his career was committed to a kind of Enlightenment project, a rationality of American thought, that one could critically engage in sophisticated and nuanced analysis to prove to the dominant white supremacist culture that, aha, we are human, that we are worthy of your support, that we are worthy citizens in the American polity. But he got shut down, and he understood bitterly it's not about an intellectual project. You can't just argue your way there, ipso facto, ex posteriori, a posteriori, a priori. and a bunch of Latin words and phrases. You can't just cogito ergo sum your way there in a Cartesian dualism that acknowledges I think, therefore I am, in my body and the consciousness in my body as a thinking reed, as Blaise Pascal would say, that mix centuries and philosophical schools. But the point is that regardless, or as the brothers and sisters in the street say, irregardless of all that knowledge and wisdom and science, that could not necessarily be used for the right thing unless we had a prevailing moral belief that would regulate what we know. That's why Einstein and others were struggling over what to do with splitting the atom. They got the science down, but if we do the science, what is the politics going to do with the science? Split an atom so you can drop a bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but you want to keep it out of the hands of Hitler and Nazi Germany or other forces of fascism. Negative notions generated in Nazism. And yet even in American democratic small d processes, we saw imperialism and colonialism creep in a devastating fashion. And so Du Bois got disabused of the notion that science itself, reason itself, could be the adjudicative force. It's not that he was irrational, not that he didn't believe in enlightenment, but he knew ultimately that enlightenment by itself would never solve the problem. William Shockley, who won a Nobel Prize in helping to invent the transistor, also was committed to eugenics and the assertion of the inherent inferiority of Negroes. And so the chaos of the pandemic shows the character of nations. And what we have seen in America is that it has revealed that there is essential inequality in this nation. Poor people still use the emergency ward as a substitute for health care. They don't have access to routine, high-quality health care. And when they do, they don't get the same kind of quality. Even if you making 150 grand as a white person, 150,000 as a black person, when they go to the hospital and they go to the doctor, say for a heart issue, the white person is still treated more aggressively than the black person because of deeply entrenched beliefs in the culture about the inherent capacity of the Negro and the colored and the African and the black person to absorb pain. And so we see that there is a deeper endemic problem, endemic to American culture, but a pandemic also, ironically, perhaps even paradoxically enough, being revealed. 2019, COVID-19 and COVID-16-19. The constant evolution of racial practice in America, as I take my seat, where America has insisted that race be the measure and metal of the American soul, even though they claim not to do so. Holding black people in chains, indigenous peoples' lands being taken, Asian brothers and sisters being exploited, Latinx brothers and sisters also being exploited. And so this pandemic has revealed through George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, that it is ongoing, dynamic. It's an organism, not an organization. It is vital and alive and destructive by that measure. And so we must grapple with it as Du Bois spoke about it, using the deepest insight, the most profound philosophy, the most powerful reflection, and ultimately standing up to march and to pledge our mettle and our commitment against its vicious rise. And so Du Bois is still relevant. His voice still cries to us. He died on the very day that the March on Washington, on the 8th anniversary of the brutal death and murder and lynching of Emmett Till, King, Till, Du Bois, and so many others on that day symbolically, and Dorothy Height, and Fannie Lou Hamer, and Joanne Robinson, and Septa McClark, and Mary Church Terrell, and Diane Nash, and Ella Baker, and so many other noble figures. John Lewis, James Farmer. And so, my brothers and sisters, Du Bois is relevant to deal with this pandemic because it is not merely a pandemic of disease and virus. It is one that is carved out from the hoary ancient beliefs and systems of thought that have continually nibbled at the heels of our great democracy, and one that Du Bois relentlessly and powerfully and persistently grappled with. That is his legacy. That is yours as well. Your challenge here at Fisk, where he was an undergraduate, take up what he said and did and use it as inspiration to continually confront the meaning and significance of race, racism, of gender oppression, of sexual violence, of orientation trauma, that is, the trauma associated with these orientations by those who are outside the parameters of the gifts of those different orientations, those who are poor, and to come together to make certain that we live his legacy. That is your challenge, and that is your powerful task in the name of the greatest thinker, intellectual, and scholar that Black America has produced. God bless you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Dyson. I want to say that was a great speech, and everything you said was perfect. I want to just go more into what he said, into more of what you said, Dr. Dyson, because what you said is a profound truth about American society and about what's wrong with the issues of America. Dr. Du Bois, he was right. Everything that he said years ago still rings true in American society. We still have issues within our own communities in terms of our own color lines. We still see the segregation of cities like Milwaukee, the segregation of Los Angeles, the segregation even here in Nashville, or there's even disparities of healthcare access, job access, and even economic access in the Black community. But what are we focusing on now in America, even though we still have the issues of the color line still here, the issues that still affect us? America would want to more focus on issues of CRT. We want to focus more on locking up brown and Black people coming here for a better opportunity, a better way of life, who we even forced. We bombed their countries, and they would come here for a better way of life, yet we want to focus on that issues, not on the issues of how African Americans still suffer in this country. We want to focus on all the wrong issues, and we're going in the wrong direction, and it hurts me. I know it hurts many of the people in here that watch our own country burning right now. We're watching our own country try to deny us the right to vote. We're literally watching our own country throw millions of dollars away in the hands of private billionaires, of the rich, but not give us, the people who worked and strive to make this country a better place, us help in a global pandemic. W.E.B. Du Bois' words still ring true during this global crisis, during this pandemic. But this pandemic has exposed the true nature of what's wrong with America for the past 2 centuries. We have not accomplished what we have meant to be as a country that's on liberty, freedom, and equality for everyone. We have not achieved that. And that's just the hard truth. But we have a choice going forward. Do we choose a chaotic community, a chaotic country where we want authoritarianism, where we deny people the right to vote, where we literally have police coming in, knocking on the doors, forcibly entering the door, not even announcing that they're police, killing people like Amir Locke, having modern-day lynchings like Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and even Breonna Taylor? Or do we want to be the vanguards, choose community? Do we want a country that's ran on equality, ran on liberty and justice for all? Do we want to make sure our country and our union stays preserved for the next generation and generation beyond and beyond? That's the choice that we have. And with that, I take my final moments and I will sit down. Thank you.
We are so pleased you have joined us today for this first annual Du Bois commemorative celebration. My name is Dr. LaTanya Rogers. I direct the honors program here at Fisk, which is named in honor of W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm also an associate professor of literature. In our classrooms here across our course curriculum, we study Du Bois, we talk about his legacy here at Fisk University, we talk about how that legacy continues with our alumni, friends of the university, our faculty, staff, and students. We are living examples of Du Bois's work and his legacy. We carry him with us everywhere we go. And I would just like to thank the president of the university, Dr. Van R. Newkirk Sr., the provost, Dr. John Jones, all the faculty and staff, and all the alumni across the generations, and in particular, this first annual commemorative Du Bois Committee for all of their hard work on this program today. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at our very next event. Take good care, and Fisk forever.